Enter the Stars. And why is the channel named that? It's because in the book of Enoch, he tells us that we each have a star in heaven, the angels and the righteous, which is the topic of today's show, the book of Enoch. Now, God is amazing because he encoded within our flesh proof of his Son and the authorship of his creation. Today, we're going to look into the scriptures that Jesus quoted specifically from the book of Enoch. Now, for those of you that don't know, the earliest copies of Enoch predate Christ's life on earth. So, by Jesus quoting these specific passages from a book that predates his existence on this planet, it confirms and validates that Enoch is something we need to take a look at. There were in fact 10 instances to be exact. There may be more, but there were 10 that were identified and found. 10 times that Jesus actually quoted directly from the book of Enoch. Now, Jesus' brother Jude also quoted from the book of Enoch specifically. But here are the passages, and this is what we're going to look at today. These are what we can call crossover scripture, quoted by both Jesus and Enoch. And in this, I found something wonderful, a gift of the Holy Spirit. Jesus' quotes describe the judgment of the world, and they also follow the pathway of light and anatomy of the inner eye and brain. Let me show you. So first we start with this judgment and the earth. Let's look at some of these scriptures. And Jesus and Enoch are very clear. He says here in this first one, the meek shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the meek. Let's pull this up a little bit so you guys can see this. For they shall inherit the earth. That was in Matthew 5:5. And Enoch says almost the exact same thing. The elect shall possess light, joy, peace, and shall inherit the earth. But where is the earth? This becomes the question. Where is the earth? I believe we found it represented in the inner anatomy of the eye. What do you mean, Casey? Well, this here is the convex lens of the eye. We exist on this earth, most likely on a raised mound. A raised mound of dirt. This is the white picket fence. It's called the choroid body of the inner eye. It's what Katy Perry sang about in her song, because they think we're all too stupid to figure it out. Seeing life through a lens inside of a white picket fence. This is what she was talking about. This central structure here, surrounded by light going up from the bottom of this lens all the way to the back of the eye, is the tree of life, the narrow gate to heaven, but we're all cut off from it because we fell into sin. Can you see the branches of the tree? And in this tree is the fruit. There are bodies within the inner eye structure hanging about the limbs of the retinal wall. And they look like figs, grapes, and pomegranates. They become the rods and cones, the bipolar cells, and there's one more that I can't think of off the top of my head. But when you look at them, they look like the fruit. Remember the pole of Eshol carried by the 12 tribes of Israel? Carried on a pole those very same fruits? Well, this may have been the pole they were talking about. Now, all of this really happened in the Bible. I'm not saying all this because it didn't happen in the Bible. It happened because God was guiding these people in their steps, and if they obeyed him, they became part of the body code. They became part of the story of the inner anatomy of the body that proves the existence of God, that proves his glory. Why? Because he knew the beginning from the end. And when man fell, our bodies were redesigned into the sin state so that one day, when knowledge increased in the last days, we would be able to look inside and see the kingdom of heaven within, which is what Jesus said would happen. So this is our universe, so to speak, and inside here are the floaters. They exist right here in the hyaloid canal, which is the tree trunk of the tree of life. Now, there were many trees in the garden, right? And we were cut off from that. We were cut off from Eden. So where is Eden? I believe Eden is in a place halfway between here and heaven, in the fruit of the garden of the tree. But we can't get to that anymore because we're stuck down here on the convex lens, seeing everything in reverse. Everything is backwards when the light comes into the eye. Everything is backwards, upside down. We are in the upside down. So now that you have a feeling for where we live, this part down here where the iris surrounds the lens is hell. This is why the Illuminati are so consumed with the eye, right? Because it's the last place they want us to look to find these deep truths. And to this point, it's been effective. No one's really thought of this or considered it. And even if you did, you'd probably quickly turn away from it, knowing that the eye is the symbol of the Illuminati, the all-seeing eye. But within the eye that God created is encoded these secrets that we discovered on this channel. The iris is the spiral to hell. This is the wide gate going out. The narrow gate is going up within the kingdom of heaven within. And there's so much more to this story. Now let's keep going with the 10 times that Jesus quoted the book of Enoch. Jesus will judge, it says here. Now we're still talking about judgment. The Father judgeth no man, but hath committed all judgment unto the Son. So Jesus gets to judge. That's in John 5:22. And Enoch says something very similar. The principal part of the judgment was assigned to him, the Son of Man. That's in Enoch 69:27. Now, he talks down here, and we'll get to this other part about the rich. They shall inherit everlasting life. That was in Matthew 19:29. Enoch says virtually the same thing. Those will inherit eternal life. And the rich, this is interesting. Now, again, these first 5 crossover verses are all about judgment. And it's very clear. There's no room for error. Woe unto you that are rich, for ye have received your consolation. Jesus' words in Luke 6:24. Enoch says almost the same thing. Woe to you who are rich, for in your riches have you trusted, but from your riches you shall be removed. Interesting, right? Another judgment scripture. But let's first get into this one about those who reject the Lord. Woe unto that man through whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had not been born. Enoch repeats, where will the habitation of sinners be who have rejected the Lord of spirits? It would have been better for them they had never been born. Now, before we get into the rest of this, which actually describes the inner anatomy, Birth is very important to this particular model of our universe. And you're probably wondering, in what way? How is this similar to birth? Well, the inner anatomy of the eye is very special place, because it contains a substance called Wharton's jelly in this vitreous humor fluid of the eye here. The Wharton's jelly is only found in one other place in the entire human body. Can you guess which place that is? That would be the umbilical cord of a child in the womb. Now, we have videos on Wharton's jelly comparing it to the manna. You see, when you're in this place, when you're in the belly, the womb, in the world, born into sin, you are in a fasting state. Remember the 40 weeks the Israelites went through the wilderness? They were fasting, eating manna. Noah was in the ark 40 days and nights in the rains of the waters, in the fasting state, cut off from the world. All of these 40s in the Bible, and there are 40 weeks that a child is in the womb. There is a reason. There is a reason for these synchronicities. And that is because what you're looking at here is also a nested reality. A nested reality of a child in the womb. Yep, this hyaloid canal becomes the umbilical cord. It becomes the tree of life. And guess what? When a child's in the womb, this hyaloid canal has a hyaloid artery that feeds and nourishes the lens and the development of the lens of the eye. And when the child is born, this disappears. It atrophies, but then floaters are left, a remnant, just like the remnant of Israel, the true Israel, not the Israel we have today. And there's even more to this story. Because the image comes in upside down. It's flipped around. And the child is in the womb upside down, right? And their head is in the crown here. Right? They're crowning here. And the iris becomes the cervix, opening and closing, just like the iris of your eye. And now you understand why God calls childbirth and childbearing, he calls it the fruit of the womb. Guess what the retinal wall becomes? It becomes the placenta surrounding the child. And the synchronicities go on and on and on. Now, the only way to the Father is through the Son. And that's why the optic nerves cross at the center of your brain. That's the cross that Jesus was crucified on. And the two eyes are the two thieves that were at his side during a crucifixion, trying to steal your salvation because of the material world. We think that we need material things to be happy, and we forget the spiritual, filling our lives with all these things, right? Now, let's get more into the specifics of some of these other verses. We're about halfway through the times that Jesus quoted Enoch. But here's where things go off the rails. Ye also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel, said Jesus. And Enoch says, I will place each of them on a throne of glory. Where are the 12 thrones? Well, I believe that they are the 12 intercranial nerves. There are exactly 12 pairs of intercranial nerves in your body. Here they are right here. In your brain, specifically. And they sit in the brain from this lower view. And they look a lot like thrones, don't they? And where did they come from? Well, you have 12 ribs in your body, and that represents the beast. And in order to get to the Father, you have to go up and ascend through Jesus, which is this area here, anatomically. Remember, all this really happened. The Son of Man is real. He came down. He died for us, was resurrected, and went back to heaven. But all of this is reflected in the anatomy of your body so that you could know who the Most High is, the one and only true God. Shed away all of the misinformation, all of the lies, and truly believe in the Son of God. Because it's all reflected in your flesh. And did he not come down and become flesh? There's a reason why the Bible keeps repeating that. Because the answers are in the flesh, are they not? So here are the 12 thrones, and you have to overcome the 12 ribs of the beast. You have to overcome the lower senses and ascend into the higher senses. The spiritual is what that means. Okay? All of this happens through Jesus. None of this is New Age. None of this is Gnostic. This is just new information in the last days. God created all of this. None of this contradicts the gospel. None of this contradicts the Bible. This is just more information. The 12 thrones going from the beast, the 2, 3, and 7 ribs that you have, that's room 237, that's the beast, ascending into the 12 thrones with the Father, represented by the brain. Here you can see his throne here. These are the armrests here, these 2 lobes. This is the chair, and in his lap sits Jesus. If you have eyes to see. Now, there's more to this, as Jesus quotes Enoch. Between us and you, there is a great gulf, fixed by a chasm. Their souls are separated. So both Enoch and Jesus talk about this chasm, this gulf between heaven and earth. What could that be? Well, if you have eyes to see, this becomes a gulf or a fixed chasm between us and God. You can't get through it except through the Son. You can't get through this except through the crossing. And this is where the line of sight, the pathway of light, opens up into what is called the optic radiation, radiating outward into a mansion of many rooms, as you see right here, into the back of the brain just above the arbor vitae, which is in Latin the tree of life. Is this all starting to sink in? Is this all starting to make sense? Now, let's go back and read Jesus' words. In my Father's house are many mansions. And Enoch said the same thing. In that day shall the elect one sit upon a throne of glory, and shall choose their conditions and countless habitations. We get to create our own reality. Interesting. That ye may be called the children of light. Aren't we talking about the pathway of light coming into the eyes? Said Jesus. And Enoch says, the good from the generation of light. It's all here. Now, Jesus also talks about the waters. And it's interesting because that's everything we've been talking about. these waters, right? All of this is bathed in water. The cerebrospinal fluid surrounds your spine and your cerebrum of the brain. It's bathed in these waters, as is a child in the womb, bathed in waters in the womb, as is the universe inside the anatomy of the eye. It's all bathed in water. This is called the vitreous humor. There's also a lower portion, I believe this is the lower waters of hell, called the aqueous humor. Interesting, right? Ever wonder why when you're in the ocean floating in the waters, you feel weightless? But then when we are told people go into quote-unquote space, they become weightless. I believe those are the spiritual waters. Now, Casey, where are all the planets and meteors and all the stuff we see up in the sky? All that's floating inside here in the firmament. The only thing fixed to the walls are the stars. And the reason why they appear to spin is an optical illusion of the inner wall. It's like a reflection, the Spirit of God moving across the waters, spinning what we see in the sky. Notice this hyaloid canal is at an angle. Guess what? It almost matches the exact angle of what we are told the Earth is tilted at. I bet you didn't know that either. This is our universe. Now, do we live inside of an eye? No, it's the shape of things. The shape of things demonstrated in our body. In other words, the universe came first, the eye came later. It's just a copy, a map. So we don't live in an eye, we live in the shape of the universe. You see, truth is about semantics, and sometimes we get lost in the semantics and we can't see the forest from the trees. Interesting, the trees, because there are tree stumps all over the surface of the convex lens Earth that were cut off, according to the book of Enoch. All the trees were cut down. All of the trees were cut down. And the remnant left are these column basalt stumps, and I believe that these were all the trees in the gardens that used to connect us to heaven before the fall of man. And they were all cut down, and that's why we can't get back to the garden. Now, during the days of Noah is when this happened, but these column basalt structures imagine the landscape. Noah, before the trees of the garden were cut down, the path to the garden, looking across the landscape, watching these conduits, these tree trunks rising up into the heavens, but having no power to travel through them into the other heavenly dimensions, into the dimensions of the garden, which Enoch tells us will be much like heaven, being able to choose our realities. Now, let's keep going with this, because there's even more. The cerebral spinal fluid, the waters that never go dry, is what Jesus talks about. Let's read. The water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water, springing up into everlasting life. And then Enoch says, all the thirsty drank and were filled with wisdom, having their habitation with the righteous, the elect, and the holy. What could he possibly be talking about? The cerebral spinal fluid in your brain self-replenishes. And many of the places that hold this water are named after wells. They're called cisterns, which are wells. This is the anatomical metaphor for the waters of heaven that never run dry, self-replenishing, eternal waters, created from what looked like a crown of thorns. And I'll let you go on that rabbit hole, because there is a microscopic image of the parts of this that create the cerebral spinal fluid that look like a crown of thorns, because that had to happen first so that we could have eternal waters, right? Look at this. Now, for greater detail on the image of Christ in this area in the back of the brain, I have many videos in the Body Code series that demonstrate the exact image of Christ in the back of the brain. This here is your arbor vitae, which is Latin for the tree of life. Vision is processed back here at the back of the brain, just above the arbor vitae, just above the tree of life, after you've gone through Jesus, the cross. Interesting stuff. Now, that sums up the 10 times that Jesus quoted Enoch. And as you can see, it follows a pathway of revelation to be unsealed in the last days, which is what we're doing right now. And that is the imprint of the Most High into our flesh. He shows us both the curse of our flesh, but he also shows us the plan of salvation and the gospel. It's all wrapped up in our flesh. And there's much, much more. I've only explained to you about 10% of all of the other discoveries we've made that directly overlay the Bible, comparing the inner anatomy of our brain, your eyes, the pathway of light, the nerves. We go over in detail the nerves, the intercranial nerves, the thrones, and how each of those plays into this. The olfactory nerve, optic nerves, trochlear nerves, they all have meaning that relate directly back to the gospel. Now, I wanted to share with you, we're going to change gears a bit here, more revelations that were revealed to me about who the Antichrist is. Now, we've talked all about Christ. Now, who will the Antichrist be? And this will begin to make all of this very real for you. You see, because I don't believe that really anyone's talking about this or preaching about this, because so often the mainstream big box churches preach through a lens of tradition. They are not open to new discoveries, many of them. I'm not saying all churches and pastors are like this, but you got to be open to this stuff and shed away labels that they try to put on people who think outside the box. What are you talking about, Casey? Well, the Antichrist is, in fact, the opposite of Christ in every way. Remember Christ? The head wound? The crown of thorns? Well, his evil Antichrist counterpart will also suffer a head wound. That's the evil counterpart version of Christ's death and resurrection. And those who believe the Antichrist and take the mark, that will be the evil counterpart of believing in Jesus to be saved. Because you're believing in the Antichrist and accepting his mark instead of Jesus' mark, right? And remember the calling down of fire from heaven that the Antichrist will do in the sight of men? Well, this will be the evil counterpart of the miracles that Jesus performed in the sight of men. So you see, this all boils down to faith and who you believe. Now, what we just covered might sound obvious to some, but I don't think anybody's really ever compared the Antichrist to Jesus like this before, and shown you that in fact, everything the Antichrist does will be the opposite of what Jesus did. And that will open up clues about what to look for when this person arrives on the scene, because they will do everything the opposite of how Jesus did it. Now, that's the show for today. We have a show scheduled every single day this week, Monday through Friday. They're already scheduled. If you want to look at the show topics, go take a look at the front page of this channel, and you'll be able to see all of the show topics for the week. There's some bombshells that I found. One was a 2006 paper by George Bush administration talking about distancing, everything we're dealing with, face masks, face coverings, VCs, the whole thing. It's all in this paper. How did I find it? All you got to do is look back in time. They're not hiding the truth, you guys. I did a Google search, and there it was. All I did was change the time frame for the search before all this madness started, and there was a plan, and Trump is following it to the letter. To the letter. They even talk about the National Guard helping with the distribution. It's all there. That show will be, I think, Thursday or Friday. I was reluctant to put it up because, as you guys know, when we start scheduling shows out, a lot of people, a lot of channels will come onto the channel and snag the information and do their own show on it and claim it as their own. Not that it matters, but the problem is it's so rare that people get redirected back to this channel to find more truth. And that's why we're stuck in the 60,000 subscriber range after being on YouTube since 2011. Because we're not greedy with the information, and we share, and anyone can use the footage and live shows on this channel whenever they want without even asking. But sometimes it just gets ridiculous. There are big channels that just watch this channel for content and then take it as their own, and you'll probably see that happen with this discovery that I just leaked that we're going to cover in detail. I'll show it to you right now. This is it right here. Let's see. Is this it? Let's see here. Court overturns. No, that's not it. There it is. There it is. Now, this is a Department of Defense paper. This is from 2005, 2006. Look at this. It's everything we're dealing with right now. Stockpiling. They even talk about getting a VC to market within 6 months, which is happening right now. Distribution plans. They talk about essential businesses. So we're going to cover all this in detail. I just wanted to show you. Credible medical spokespersons. This was Bush's influenza spamdemic plan. And it matches almost exactly everything we're going through right now. Guidance. Remember all this? They keep talking about guidance, guidance, guidance. Here it is right here. Distribution. Okay. Now this isn't meant to scare you. This is meant to show you the truth. Okay. Talk about travel. Travel ban. The whole thing. It's all here. Okay. Screening. Contact tracing. They don't say contact tracing, but they talk about screening. Okay. There's a part in there I wanted to show you about the... Anyway, that's a whole nother show. All right. Let's answer a couple questions about the body code, the shape of the universe, and how Jesus quoted Enoch 10 times, and how that revealed another key to unlock the mysteries of the shape of our universe and our reality. Okay. Yes, the mask is another division. I agree, Lisa. It's all on how you handle it. You don't have to comply to... I mean, you're not going to further divide things just by not complying. Okay? They want it that way. All right. Guys have any questions before we end the show today? Yes, that's one thing we're going to cover in Mom's DIY is the multiple VCs that they want to give and the mRNA. I found another paper. Again, simple searches across date ranges in Google. Paper popped up talking about all of the concerns about mRNA VCs. We'll get into that on one of the shows this week. There are many. You didn't know. Toxicity, adverse events. Let's talk about the safety of these mRNA. Why don't we have a choice to decide if we want to risk it without a VC and take our chances? Why are we forced into one choice that has its own risks? Why do they get to decide what is acceptable risk? You guys, we're entering an era of, I don't recognize this world anymore. That so many people could justify this. And if you don't think that the end game isn't to force this on us, you're sadly mistaken. They've already got case precedent set up for this. But yet everybody that I talk to who believes the lie that we're going through right now says, oh, I won't take a VC. And even though I believe that this is real, I won't take it. And I go, by admitting or thinking or believing that this thing is real, you're already acknowledging that one day a VC can be forced on you. Because if you're going to believe the government in terms of if this is real or not, then you're going to believe that they have case precedent to force you to take it. You guys, we got to wake up from this because the end game is the end game. You know, if there was no case precedent for this and legally they didn't feel it was their right to force this on us, then I would say, okay, enough people wake up, we can decline this. But the problem is they're leading us down a path. They already know where they're leading us. We're like cattle being led literally to the slaughter. And because people are so asleep and they believe that their government could never do anything to harm them, they just follow along. They walk right along the path, the well-worn path. Isn't that interesting? All right, we're going to start to wind this up. I hope maybe we helped some people wake up from this. Guys, this isn't about right or left. This isn't about, oh, Trump is bad. No, this isn't about that. The Clintons, Obama, they're all involved in this. They're all friends. That's why they'll never go to jail. And we've heard the excuses. But at the end of the day, they all have stuff on each other. This is why none of them ever get brought to justice. And all this quote-unquote justice that's happening is all smoke and mirrors. None of it goes to the top. Unless you want to call Eggstein and Giswell the top, which it's not. Because we've gleaned literally nothing from these revelations. That was more like a cover-up. All right. Guess we're going to end the show there. Appreciate everybody coming out. Big group for a Monday. We'll be back on here bright and early, same exact time tomorrow. I love each and every one of you. Have a great day.